Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started, and I think some others will join us as we go along. My name is Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, or PAVE. And PAVE's mission is to educate the public about automated vehicles and the promise that they offer for our society and our transportation system. We are super excited to join the TechCelerate Now team in hosting this webinar today. When we first started talking to them, we realized the exciting overlap between their efforts to talk about automated technology in fleets and our mission to educate the public. So we thought this was a great opportunity. We have an exciting agenda planned for today, but I want to turn it over to Dan Murray, who will talk a little bit about the TechCelerate Now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tara. I really appreciate that. You know, technology is penetrating the transportation arena very, very quickly, most noticeably in the car sphere, less so in the trucking industry. And yet, with nearly 5,000 truck-involved fatalities a year, it certainly represents a huge opportunity for us to start to investigate active safety systems. FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, as you know, has now created this new initiative called TechCelerate Now. It essentially is focused on identifying the data, the research, the messaging, the perceptions and awareness and adoption levels of advanced driver assistance systems in trucking. And since ADAS is not flowing off the tongue, we've just renamed the program TechCelerate. TechCelerate program is looking at all those aspects, including, again, marketing, video brochures. We're about to release in the next maybe month or so an ROI calculator that will help the trucking industry understand what the inputs are and what the outputs are when you consider adopting advanced driver assistance systems. A key part of that research, and the research team, by the way, includes ATRI, the Technology and Maintenance Council, the American Trucking Associations, and the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, also known as OIDA. All of those folks are with us today. All of them will provide comment on key tasks they're involved in. This first task we're going to discuss right now is one of the most important tasks. We have Matt Camden with Virginia Tech, VTTI, Kevin Grove, who's now with the American Trucking Associations, and Tom Weekley. We'll talk to you about issues and impediments. If you don't resolve misunderstandings, misperceptions, concerns, we don't have a lot of opportunity to move forward with adoption. So we're going to start with Matt, assisted by Kevin, talking about a lot of the technical issues and aspects of these ADAS technologies. So with that, Matt, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a few slides for us to go over today. So again, thanks a lot, Dan. Happy to be here. So Kevin Grove is also joining me on this call. Kevin is, as Dan mentioned, recently with ATA. However, when we did this task, Kevin was actually part of the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. So happy to still have Kevin involved in this project as he was a key author on this task. So what I'm going to be talking about today was kind of in the early stages of this project, where VTTI was in charge of investigating and identifying research on the technical barriers and challenges, and also the market barriers that are limiting fleets adopting ADAS technologies. So just a very brief introduction. You know, before we kind of promote and try to accelerate ADAS in the trucking industry, we really must understand the decision-making process related to fleets purchasing and implementing ADAS in their organizations and on their vehicles. So there's kind of two main barriers that we looked at. The first are the technical barriers. So when we are talking about technical barriers, these are the factors that impact the ADAS's ability to function as it was intending. And these are really kind of the engineering technical aspects of that technology. And it's really looking at kind of the unintended consequences of the hardware or software, and also kind of the development process and how new that technology is in the real world and with fleets. The second part is different. It's the market barriers. So these are factors that impact the acceptance of technology. So this could be more on the lines of how fleets or drivers accept it and use it. And again, this is unrelated to kind of the hardware or software performance per se, although there are certain aspects of false alerts or a lot of driver warnings that could impact the market barriers. So what did we do in this task? Well, first we looked at what was already known. What was the published research? What was the industry saying regarding barriers to ADAS adoption? So we examined all the prior work and really drafted a potential list of initial issues and barriers. With that initial list, we formed a research panel. These were key stakeholders in the industry. They were key stakeholders on this project and OEM and tech providers. And we wanted to make sure that there was equal and good representation of the industry on this research panel. And basically what we did was we did interviews, sometimes multiple interviews with each of the people on this panel. And through those interviews, we developed, a really comprehensive list of potential issues and potential barriers that may be limiting the adoption of ADAS in trucks. We also discussed this list with FMCSA and, re-engaged the research panel throughout this process, going back and forth with them to really refine that list. So, based on all the feedback we got, we analyzed it. We put it all together. There were a lot of common threads mentioned across all the stakeholders and the prior work. And really, there's a lot of cross-cutting factors that we saw in all of the interviews and in all the data we collected. So one thing that we haven't really talked about and Dan didn't mention, in TechCelerate, there's kind of 4 buckets of technologies that we are focusing on. So the first kind of bucket of technology or category of technologies is ADAS braking. So this could be automatic emergency braking or adaptive cruise control types of technologies. And what we know that this is a fairly mature ADAS. However, with that said, there's been a lot of development in the last 5 years, specifically with AEB technologies. Because of this rapid development of AEB, a lot of the technical barriers have actually been addressed. When we started to research this, and in fact, Kevin led this when he was at VTTI about 5+ years ago, there were some significant technical barriers regarding false alerts or just differences in technology. And what we think is, and what we're hearing from the stakeholders that we talk to, a lot of these barriers are being addressed in the most current generation of technologies that are available in the 2020, 2021, and 2022 trucks that are being purchased right now. But in terms of some of the barriers that we identified and we heard of, were potential unrealistic expectation of ADAS braking functionality. So for instance, drivers and fleets may have unrealistic expectations of when an AEB system would actually activate. What are the scenarios where an AEB system may activate? How hard would that truck actually brake by itself? So these are kind of some things, some myths or misunderstandings or unrealistic expectations that we're hearing and what we're seeing. We also saw that there was a lack of efficacy data with the current generation of technologies. So there's been a lot of research or some research on real world safety benefits and cost of AEB. But most of that research was done on previous generations of the technology. So as I just kind of alluded to, with this rapid development of AEB, the systems are getting better and better. They have more braking power and they can respond in different situations. So there was really kind of a lack of efficacy data on these newest generations to identify exactly how many types of crashes they're going to be preventing. And without this information, it could be impacting a fleet's decision to voluntarily adopt AEB in their trucks. And then also, it could contribute to inappropriate use. So if a driver is expecting AEB to kind of back them up into a system in an emergency situation, but that AEB doesn't necessarily have the power to brake fully in that type of situation, driver may over rely on that system, or they may expect it to back them up in a situation where it's not supposed to back them up. And we also know that the opinions of ADAS braking are likely going to be influenced by previous generations. So this is something we've heard over a number of different projects. So if a driver had experience with a truck with a previous generation of AEB and they might not have liked it for whatever reason, well, that's going to influence their opinions of the current generation, even if that current generation of the technology has now addressed whatever limitations or shortcomings or issues that driver had problems with previously. So the second category, their second bucket of ADAS are steering types of technologies. Now, compared to ADAS braking, ADAS steering is an immature type of technology compared to the other categories of the other buckets of ADASs that we're going to be talking about. Prior to, or when we were doing this kind of lit review and stakeholder interviews, for the most part, the ADAS steering technologies were limited to kind of pilot test and developmental task for the ADAS providers. But the full scale options for adoption are really kind of just now being implemented in the vehicles that are being purchased right now. So because of this, there's really limited information on the technical or market or really efficacy data out there regarding kind of the real world application of ADAS steering technologies. But we do have some early signs, some early indications that, there are potential knowledge gaps regarding when these systems will be used and when they're appropriate to be used. And then also feature confusion. We see this on the light vehicle side of ADAS too. With different types of ADAS steering features. Drivers may be confused on exactly what their truck has and the capabilities of that ADAS steering component. Another potential barrier that we heard about is, unlike light vehicle drivers, where typically the driver is going to be driving down the middle of the lane, hopefully at all times, CMV drivers are driving a vehicle that's 8.5 feet wide. And depending on what road they're going to be driving on, that CMV could be taking up the vast majority of that lane line. So especially on narrow lane lines, narrow roads, CMV drivers tend to not drive directly down the middle of the lane. So if it's a rural roadway or just narrow lanes in general, a driver may hug the right side or the left side of the lane line depending on traffic around them. And this could create potential barriers and acceptance of the technology with drivers if they're getting a lot of warnings or if the vehicle is trying to steer them back into the middle of the lane when a driver wouldn't necessarily want to be driving in the middle of the lane in that scenario or with that type of traffic around them. The third bucket of technologies are ADAS warning technology. So, again, this is similar to the ADAS braking. These are pretty mature types of technologies. They've actually been around longer than AEB, around any other type of ADAS that's actually taking control of the vehicle. They're really kind of the foundation for these. So, before a driver receives an AEB activation, they're going to get a forward collision warning, right? Telling them that they are approaching a vehicle or an object or a pedestrian or bicycle. And there is an imminent collision there. So we know that they're mature. There's been a lot of research looking at these technologies and how effective they are at preventing crashes. So, as I said before, they are often paired with other more advanced types of ADASs. So forward collision warning is going to be paired with AEB. Lane departure warning is going to most likely be paired with an ADAS steering type of technology. Some of the barriers that we identified and we see with these technologies can be related to the vision-based systems of them. So say, for instance, lane departure warning. That's a primarily a vision-based system for the most part, and it's going to rely on clear roadways and also clear and well-maintained markings on those roadways. So if there's some, snow on the road, lane departure warning typically is not going to pick up those lane lines anymore. If the lane markings are worn or they are not well marked, then lane departure warning may not pick up on those lane lines. Therefore, the driver may not get a warning when they cross or get near a lane line. Also in construction zones, oftentimes there's old lane markings in construction zones, and drivers notoriously tell us that they get very annoyed with how frequently these lane departure warning alerts are going off. And then even for non-vision based systems, so for instance, radar based warning, so forward collision warning, typically they can be radar based. They can pick up on guardrails or overpasses or roadside signs. Now, again, the current generation of these radar-based technologies have gotten a lot better and really have limited these false alerts. But with that said, I'm sure drivers are still going to be getting limited numbers of these false alerts, but hopefully very, very few. So with these types of warning devices, a lot of the barriers are associated with this annoyance factor that drivers often cite as related to them. But we know the research does show that they are effective at getting drivers' attention back on the forward roadway and getting them to pay attention or look up if they're distracted or if they're tired or if they're doing a driving task, but maybe looking at their instrument panel or looking at a side mirror. And it's good at getting their attention back on the forward roadway. Another kind of barrier here, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a barrier, but a limitation of the warning device systems is that it's relying on a driver response. So if a driver is incapacitated for a medical reason, for instance, a warning is not going to most likely prevent a crash from occurring because the vehicle doesn't take control. So that's really where the AEB is providing a big assistance to the driver in these scenarios where a driver, for whatever reason, doesn't respond quickly enough or in time. So it's just kind of a limitation of the warning types of technologies. And then the fourth bucket that TechCelerate Now focuses on are ADAS monitoring technologies. So these could be kind of three main focuses. So they could be like a road-facing driver monitoring system. It could also be a driver-facing driver monitoring system, or it could be what we're calling like a 360-degree visibility system that are becoming or penetrating the market somewhat now. They're fairly new, but they're starting to penetrate the market. What we know from our research and from talking with fleets and talking with other industry stakeholders is that kind of just the monitoring systems themselves, like the dash cams or the driver facing systems, the technology alone isn't necessarily improving safety at all. It's what the fleets do with that data and do with the technology. Now, a lot of the camera-based driver monitoring systems, there is strong resistance from drivers in the industry, which is a barrier. Specifically talking about the driver-facing cameras. So kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but there are industry best practices that we can talk about and you can look up to really help drivers understand and help fleets understand what these technologies should be used for and what they shouldn't be used for. And in our research and talking with fleets, this has overcome some of the barriers associated with these driver monitoring systems. There's also concerns about liability. Anytime we're doing presentations at VTTI about driver monitoring systems, it's undoubtable a question is going to come up about the legal liability of these types of data. So again, this is a barrier. It's something to think about, but it's definitely something that I think is worth considering and can be overcome if done properly. Placement with these types of vision-based systems is important too. We can't be putting something on the windshield and blocking the driver's visibility of the forward roadway or anything out the side windows. So again, this is something to be considered. Most of the driver monitoring systems out there know this, and they provide guidance on where these things should be placed. And then the camera mirror systems I mentioned, they're limited in the US market. I think that they're more prevalent in overseas markets, but they are becoming more prevalent here. There are now 2 technology providers that have been given an exemption from FMCSA to provide these camera mirror systems. And early indications show that drivers like them. It reduces the nose zones and the blind spots around the vehicles, so that's really good. But there is a need for a more scientific study looking at the efficacy of these types of systems to show in the real world, really how many types of crashes or how many crashes and the types of crashes that they could be prevented. And these types of things can help eliminate some of the resistance and some of the barriers associated with them. So with this said, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to overcome these barriers. So, looking at ADAS technologies intended to assist the driver. Again, it's really important to think about ADAS as driver assistance systems. They are not there to take the driver's job. They are there to be a backup to that driver in an emergency situation, or if an emergency situation does develop. I think this is really big, and driving home this message can go a long way into overcoming a lot of these market types of barriers out there. Also encourage the use of ADAS warning devices. They work. Research shows that they work, providing insight into why fleets remove ADAS from standard packages. So this is something where most of if not all of the major OEMs for trucks are providing AB as standard technology. And with that said, fleets can elect to remove AB from that standard package. So if we can better understand why fleets are choosing to remove that from the standard package, this could help overcome some of the barriers as well. Of course, getting more data. We love data, and data is really important to understanding exactly what's going on and the efficacy of these types of systems, especially the newer systems out there, like the ADAS steering ones and the camera mirror systems. ROI. So Dan mentioned this project is getting an ROI calculator. We've developed one at VTTI as well. ROI is a big thing. With the technologies that have sufficient real world data, or our indications in talking with fleets is that these technologies have a positive ROI for fleets that implement them. So this is important. Getting this type of real world ROI information out there is going to be really important to overcome some of the market barriers as well.
We have about 30 seconds left.
Yep, doing outreach demonstrations is big, and I think that's why TechCelerate Now is really important, because that's what this program is doing. And then supporting ADAS in markets where adoption is lagging. So this could be in medium duty or in specific industries for the heavy duty market as well. So with that, Dan, I'll pass it back to you and be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Matt, and Kevin as well, for all your support of this. Our next presenter is Tom Weekley, who, as I mentioned, is with the Owner-Operated Independent Driver Association. Much easier to say OIDA, if I might. Matt had mentioned multiple times that the driver's input and the driver concerns are critical. ATRI is the not-for-profit research institute of the trucking industry, and our research is showing that not only on the truck driver issues are the drivers concerned about autonomous technologies taking away their jobs and their responsibilities, on motor carrier side, their number one issue is the driver shortage, and they're very hesitant to do anything that might upset their existing drivers, let alone future recruitment. So Tom is going to talk about some of the activities he's been involved with, particularly focused on the perspectives of the truck driver. With that, Tom, I'm showing your PowerPoint. I believe it's visible, and I will progress the slides as you tell me.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to first thank FMCSA and Jeff Loftus and Dan and ATRI and the PAVE and Noblest for inviting us to be a part of this. As oftentimes we feel like we're somewhat the redheaded stepchild who doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and yet this particular program obviously needs to have input from our members, because it's our members who are more than likely going to be the ones that are going to be less accepting or more critical of and have more concerns about these various systems that you want to put on their trucks than perhaps a big fleet would be. But it is important to note that our members believe that various safety technologies, especially air disc brakes, blind spot detection, and forward warning collision, hold promise in assisting both the new and experienced truck driver to operate safely. But these features are only a portion of the large group of technologies known as the advanced driver assistance systems, several of which have existed really for many years. Forward warning collision, lane departure warning, and other crash avoidance systems been available since the 1990s, even in the truck. So, and though interest in these systems are growing within certain segments of the industry, such as large asset-based motor carriers, the trucking industry overall has yet to experience a large-scale adoption of ADS, as owner-operators, small fleet owners often do not receive direct benefits of these technologies within their operations. And herein lies the problem. In particular, there's a disconnect between academics, safety groups, and large carriers who believe that these technologies are essential for safety, and the experienced driver who has worked in the trucking industry for 20 years without an accident and who does not believe ADAS is necessary to make them a better driver. And I use that term better driver because unfortunately, that's oftentimes the way it's promoted, is it will make you a better driver. Not a good term to use. Okay, why are guys a little more, I guess, suspicious of some of these things? Because Matt kind of alluded to this. In the past, there has been a lot of problems with newly released supposedly safety systems, which has caused a lot of anxiety among our members, just annoyances from time to time. They did a study in 2016, NHTSA did, where they did a collision avoidance system survey, not survey particularly, but where they tested emergency braking, impact alerts, following distance alerts, forward collision warning alerts, and lane departure warning. It was a one-year study, collecting 85,000 hours of driving and 885,000 of these collision avoidance system activations for 169 drivers operating 150 Class 8 trucks from 7 different carriers. That's really pretty good. It was found that 75% of the collision avoidance system activations were in response to a valid vehicle or object in the path of the truck. But at the same time, the activation of a crash avoidance maneuver was not necessary, while 11% of the alerts were false, which an experienced driver would say effectively equates to 758,162 alerts, which were not necessary or did not improve safety. It appears that lawmakers and regulators have set much of their focus on technology as the potential panacea for greater safety on the roadways. And that's something that really our guys take exception to. Next slide, if you will, Dan. All right. The average owner operator that we surveyed on some of these things and what impediments, some problems and concerns they had with some of these systems. And we have 159 approximately 1,000 members driving 220,000 trucks, pulling over 350,000 trailers. The average owner-operator member of Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, OIDA, has been involved in trucking for almost 30 years and has been an owner-operator for nearly 20 years. During that time, the typical owner-operator has accumulated 2.6 million miles of driving, most of which was without a DOT reportable accident. Therefore, it is important to understand, in light of these facts, that when developers and safety groups market ADS to truckers, it can come across as offensive to an experienced driver. For example, when ADS advertisement portrays truck drivers as the sole cause for the most recent increase in crashes, without mentioning or considering other factors, such as in passenger car vehicles that drive unsafely around big rigs, it does not help the professional driver to see any need for technology. Justifying the need for more driver assistance programs because it has been shown that, and we hear this quoted quite a bit, 90% of all crashes are from the driver error. Immediately puts the experienced driver in a defensive position. You have just alienated the drivers from listening to you. They just tuned you out. So what should you do? Well, you should stress the assistance part of the system because of the difficulty, especially in the high speed, high congestion industry that we must work in, where four-wheelers dart in and out of traffic, drive and text, and pay little or no attention to the road or safety. If you approach it that way, you have a common ground where our members and other drivers will agree with you to offer some assistance in dealing with these continuous problems. If proponents of ADAS desire greater adoption of these technologies within the trucking industry, then it's important that they are open and upfront regarding the limitations of ADAS and how the technologies can truly assist the driver, not replace the driver. With this view in mind, FMCSA initiated this new program, TechCelerate Now, to develop a national outreach campaign to help accelerate the adoption of promising ADS technology within trucking. The OOIDA Foundation, the research and educational arm of IDA, was asked to participate in this research by surveying drivers, owner-operators, and small trucking carriers in order to gain their real-world perspectives of ADAS. Next slide, Dan. That's the first time I've been able to tell Dan what to do. That's pretty nice. ADS survey baseline response. Okay. We took a representative sampling of those members, our members, that allow for email communication from the foundation, and that is approximately about 80% of them allow us to use email communication. In order to eliminate any potential bias, as well as to make the survey geographically representative, we first sorted the membership data by state, generated a random number for every member, and then selected the top 30%. We had a sample size then of about 26,545. The ADS survey baseline, which OFIA mailed on Wednesday, June 30th, 2020, generated 721 responses for any one question as of Wednesday, July 1st of 2020. That's within a 1-month period. We are lucky within the foundation that we have access to some 80,000 or more emails that we can immediately put these surveys out to. Next slide, Dan. We asked them what their type of operation was, which best describes their type of operation, which is always important to know because there's always differences there. Survey respondents were comprised almost entirely of owner-operators, 73%, which makes sense, with a small segment of company drivers, 21%, and fleet owners, 4%. The owner-operators consisted of two distinct segments, owner-operators under their own authority, 31%, owner-operators leased onto a motor carrier, it's about 41%. And from our past surveys, that's pretty typical, a little more than leased on than what we normally get with our other biannual surveys. Next question, next slide, excuse me. How many years have you been a truck driver? The majority of members indicated they were between the ages of 45 and 64, 68%. Male, 95%, and have been a truck driver for more than 21 years. That's 72% of them. Obviously, our population is for the older, more experienced drivers out there. We don't represent too many of the young, new drivers that are coming on board to most of these carriers. Next slide. And how many trucks do you or your carrier have? In regards to their operation, most survey respondents have one truck, 45%, operate in the for-hire segment of the industry, 84%, and describe themselves as a truckload carrier, 77%. Flatbeds are the most commonly pulled trailer for those under their own authority, 26%, while lease-on owner-operators and company drivers primarily pull dry vans, and fleet owners predominantly pull reefers. Next slide. Awareness and knowledge of ADAS. Of the 12 ADS technologies presented, the 3 most known systems overall were road-facing cameras, air disc brakes, and forward collision warning, respectively. The 3 least known were adaptive steering control, camera-based mirror systems, and active lane centering assist. In general, the older, more experienced members tended to be less familiar with technologies such as lane departure warning and forward collision warning, while the younger, less experienced members were inclined to be more familiar. That does not mean that they're more receptive, which we can talk about a little bit later. A separate survey we did kind of based on this about whether younger drivers would be more responsive to and would be more likely to adopt various assistance programs and systems than the older drivers, but a little bit of a shocking result that we found on that. Next slide, Dan. Top ranked technologies for expected adoption. According to the survey results, OIDA members believe that air disc brakes, forward collision warning, and blind spot warning have the greatest probability for adoption by the industry, respectively, whereas driver-facing cameras, adaptive steering control, and active lane centering assist, respectively, have the least possibility. The only exceptions stem from company drivers and those operating one truck who believe that road-facing cameras would see a higher adoption rate than blind spot warning, and less experienced drivers who believe that automatic emergency braking would be the first technology for the industry to adopt. I failed to mention probably that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 28,000 company drivers as members, as well as our owner operators. So, and most people probably aren't even aware of that. Next slide. In terms of safety, 72% believe that air disc brakes either moderately or largely improve safety, while 64% felt the same for blind spot warning and 50% for road-facing cameras. This view was mostly consistent throughout the different types of operations and fleet size, though there was some difference in opinion to regards to road-facing cameras. In particular, a slight majority of the respondents under their own authority, as well as those operating one truck, felt that road-facing cameras would have no improvement upon safety. Conversely, the top three technologies that OIDA members thought would harm safety included driver-facing cameras, automatic emergency braking, and adaptive steering control. The road-facing cameras was the only system in which a majority of the members actually had the technology equipped, 57%. And most of the time, by the way, for that is the fact that it does help your insurance rates. And it gives you some, protection against false claims of, you being involved in the accident and the cause of it. The same was true for those members who indicated they either operated more than one truck or were leased on or employed by a carrier who operated more than one truck. The newer technologies such as adaptive steering control, active lane centering assist, camera-based mirror systems, active lane keeping assist, and blind spot warning all incurred adoption rates below 10%. Next slide. Perhaps one of the greatest barriers to ADS adoption in the industry is the disconnect between academics and safety groups and large carriers who believe that these are essential for safety. It's important to understand that factors might include, thus it was important to understand what factors might influence OIDA members to either purchase or not purchase one or all of these technologies. Next slide, Dan. Okay, the most influential factors in deciding to purchase ADS. In regards to purchasing ADS, respondents stated that the three most important factors to them were the possibility to lower insurance premiums, the actual cost of the technology, and the possibility of tax deductions or credits, respectively. It is important to note that there is a very little evidence, however, that insurance premiums were decreased for simply installing one of these systems. I will tell you from 50-some years of being in the industry and dealing with insurance on a regular basis, including owner-operators office insurance to its members. The answer you normally get when you talk about this from any insurance group is, it's too new of a technology, it hasn't yet proved itself, and if as time goes by, blah, 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 it will, if it does show to be beneficial and there are less crashes and other accidents, then they will consider lowering, the cost of the insurance. So that's normally what you get. Conversely, the three factors which the members designate as the most influential to not purchase an ADAS technology, the driver losing control. That will be the common theme. When you take control away from the driver, they don't like that. Let's talk bundling, which Matt mentioned also. Most equipment manufacturers will not allow just one technology to be a part of the truck. Instead, they want to bundle the technologies so that while the claim is for greater safety, the cost of the additions add considerable cost to the product, and the foundation suspects it's more of a profit motive. Certainly they need to try to make back the money that they've invested in testing this type of equipment and so forth. We've also seen where I might want one of them or maybe two of them, but instead I have to get 4 of them or 6 of them. That's not something that goes over well with our members. Developers and marketers will do well to keep these factors in mind if they're truly concerned with the low adoption rate of ADS in trucking. Next slide. Okay, most influential factors in deciding not to purchase ADS. Most members commented they have not experienced any difficulties in purchasing an ADS technology simply because they have not attempted to purchase one or one at all for a variety of reasons. One member wrote, not interested. These technologies, except for air disc brakes, which are phenomenal, are either ineffective at improving safety, to extremely dangerous due to driver loss of control, distraction, or simple false confidence by the operator that the truck will automatically take proper actions. For those respondents who have purchased the technology or have one installed on their trucks, they stated they have experienced false activations, expenses, maintenance repairs, and other issues. One member commented, we haul hazmat liquids. A couple of our trucks are equipped with rollover mitigation by way of ABS system. It's a hazard that the brakes will turn on unexpectedly and could cause a surge of liquids, which can lead to a rollover incident. This scenario defeats the purpose of the system. The manual even hints that care must be taken when hauling tankers, but there's no provision to turn it off. And being an old tanker driver and hazmat hauler that had a hazmat fleet of trucks, that would be a serious concern for me, along with some of these AEB trucking or braking systems right now, which, you know, that you get hauling liquids in a truck, single bore especially, is dangerous enough without having a brake suddenly come on that you're not expecting. Others stated that these systems do not make good drivers better, but in fact, dumb down the industry, believing that TechCelerate Now technologies leads to an over-reliance in the ADS, which then leads to inattention and fatigue. A member commented, I've had drivers say as a fact that they don't have to pay as much attention with technology. While a few respondents stated that the technology might improve compliance or be good in theory, the systems themselves are often unreliable. When speaking of automatic emergency braking, one member wrote, I have personally witnessed traffic accidents caused by an active braking system activating at the wrong time. The same member also commented on lane departure warning systems, saying doing 100% oversized loads, many of the systems, lane departure steering assist in particular, would not work well as I am constantly and purposely not in the center of the lane. With no way to bypass or turn the system off, it would be more of a hazard to have it. Ultimately, members emphasize the call for better trained drivers as the solution for obtaining better safety on the roadways. I don't believe any of these will improve safety or productivity. This is from the members. Only when drivers are properly trained will there be any improvements. Adding more technology only increases distractions and gives drivers a false sense of security. Obviously, there's some work to be done to get a large segment of the over-the-road long-haul drivers, which dominates our membership, to adopt some of these assistance programs. There needs to be, to me, things I've seen and witnessed and listened to from our drivers and owner-operators. They feel like they're being talked down to. They're being told that they are the cause of, reason for all these crashes. And that just turns them off immediately. It's you've lost them at that point. Got to emphasize the fact that these are driver assistance systems, that they are good drivers. This is going to make them better drivers and actually can help prevent them from having accidents, which may be more because of the four-wheelers that are driving, you know, more dangerously than they should, faster than they should, etc. I don't know who decides that it's more important to talk down to drivers, but that's got to change because they're not going to adopt these things. And all those things that have gone before, as Matt mentioned, they don't want to be guinea pigs. They don't want to have to say, yes, all these things were true before. You had all these false activations, but we've improved them so much. Show me before I accept it. I want to see it. It's just not out there yet. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A now. Well, we do have some questions in the chat and Q&A box. I'd urge you to go to primarily the Q&A box and type in any questions. I'm just going to take the moderator's prerogative to answer a couple really quickly. One that we've heard from several people regarding air disc brakes. Early on, and air disc brakes, by the way, are foundational to facilitating a lot of ADAS technologies, but as several of our chat responders have indicated, it is not an ADAS technology. We're well aware of that. It was sort of formally added to the list, maybe inappropriately, and we're not focused on air disc brakes, and you'll see very easily and quickly that most of our materials now, both the research and outreach materials, have dropped air disc brakes. Number two, somebody asked about level 4 trucking, saying we should focus on that. ATRI's been heavily involved in all kinds of autonomous truck research. I cordially beg to differ. Level 4 is far from ready. You might hear from Rob Mosley in a short while. There's huge litigation issues. We don't even have these systems, and we're being sued left and right, and wait for some of these systems to come into play. Furthermore, there's not a one of these systems that can operate in a snowstorm. I know that because I work with a lot of the suppliers, and not one of them will do field testing in Minnesota in January yet. So there's other issues. You can't do a federally mandated annual daily vehicle inspection when you don't have a human involved. So we don't foresee level 4 and 5 showing up for years. And all the testing that's being done on I-10 in the southern states, they say it's level 4. There's a driver sitting there with his hand on the steering wheel and his foot on the brake. That's not level 4. So we are focused, as the responder noted, on level 2 and 3, because these are active systems in most cases. The driver stays in the seat, so we have redundancy in terms of responses. And because it's available today, not 3, 5, or 10 years from now, it does give us an opportunity to make immediate impact in terms of safety by moving into ADAS. As you said, a driver assistance is sort of the near-term way of the future. So with that, I'm going to shut up and focus back on both Matt, Kevin, and Tom for questions. We've heard from Tom very clearly that the drivers are hesitant. Tom, there is a question related to how many of your drivers are really 30 plus years of experience. Well, ATRI's own truck driver demographic data shows that the average age of truck drivers, depending on which population, is 47 to 54 years old. They're not all driving 30 years. Some of them are in their second or third career, and they'll show up at 45 years old. But the vast majority of the trucking industry is older and experienced. We have the smallest young population coming in of any industry sector, and we have the oldest population retiring of any industry sector. So when Tom says the older folks don't either understand or appreciate or want these systems, we have to take that very seriously. I'm going to ask you, Matt, and Kevin, as necessary. One of the big fears we heard from Tom is that drivers think, and some carriers think, that these systems are going to take over. I have some of these systems on my Ford Explorer, and I can always turn out of lane keeping. I can always hit my gas when it might think I need to brake. Can you tell us, Matt, whether that fear that the technology is going to take control from the driver is real?
Yeah, so I can, provide some insight. Similar to you, the level 4 systems and certainly the level 5 systems are such a long ways away. Yeah, they could be being developed now, of course, or being tested now. But to get these systems really accelerated into the industry and into the fleets is so long. Drivers are going to be needed for possibly forever in the truck. I think it's critical. So especially in the near term, in near term 10 years, the driver is going to be there, and we need these systems to provide assistance in the event of something happening. So, Tom mentioned, a lot of crashes are caused or at least initiated by the light vehicle driver. So having an ADAS technology in that truck to help that driver if needed is really important. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree about that. I think we've discovered that these technologies are blame neutral, and it just, it mitigates a crash. As Tom noted, the vast majority of government data says the causal factor is given to the car driver. But the good news is, even with the car driver, the four-wheelers, we call them, doing stupid things, many of these crashes can still be mitigated.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for answering these questions. That's great. I think we still have Andrew Smart's presentation. We can turn to that, I think, next.
Yes, thank you very much. So maybe I'll give a different perspective on what we've heard from so far. Let me get this set up. Lovely. So what I'd like to do today is basically the transition between ADAS, ADAS to ADS for trucking. But firstly, Stantec Generation AV, we're a global practice within Stantec that's focused upon accelerating automated mobility systems, the deployment. Support clients in AV deployment, policy, safety, and our holistic safety assessment, really wherever the client is in the AV journey. I want to go through topics for today, very important, really, as it's the basic understanding of these terms that really is the basis for trust and confidence in the technology. If the public or the customer, the driver, or the operator do not have confidence or feel safe in the application, then AV deployment will not happen at the scale that has been predicted. So the trust and confidence in the safety of an AV is critical, I think, as we've just heard from the discussion earlier. But ADAS to ADS, it isn't just a simpler acronym. We'll go through that in a second. Quick example in ADAS, but then also to what is happening with an ADS in terms of benefits, current state, and future state. Definitions, a dry topic, but let's get stuck in. I think as people have mentioned here, ADAS itself and what we need to be clear upon is it is driver assistance. That's what it is. Because what has happened is really a commonly used term, and it's a range of features. And these features can range from collision for collision warning, lane keep assist, emergency braking, parking, so a wide variety of things. And this is where I think TechCelerate is at the right place at the right time, because if you get the definitions right in the beginning, everyone is speaking the same language. If not, people start speaking at cross purposes, which is a dangerous game. And then all it does is add confusion. I added below that something that Dad had mentioned, and this is a term. I'm involved in several SAE committees, and definitions are very important to us. We prefer a lot of these systems as active safety systems. It's not just a convenience feature, it's what systems are actually active safety. And these are the systems that are actually going to alert you. Some people do find these a little annoying. Some people think they've been scolded as a school child. Some like them, some don't. It's a personal preference. Other elements, it's a case of, yes, they can take over the system, advanced braking, or braking when reversing, or adapting into lane centering, etc. So again, these features are something that can be on or off in the vehicle, but these are systems that the definitions are extremely important to define correctly. Now, one of the reasons why TechCelerate is important is what you're looking at here is one term, collision mitigation, and 40 versions that were denoted by different OEMs. This came from the four-wheelers or the passenger car market. What this was, the marketing people saw this as a great opportunity for differentiation with safety features. But the real message here is do not potentially confuse customers, users, operators when it comes to safety. This helps no one. In fact, this actually decelerates things, doesn't accelerate it, because you then get a confused operator. And then if people don't understand, then people don't want. We went from driver assistance with ADAS into ADS. And what this is described here, this is automated driving. So this is the collective term that will drive the vehicle, not assist, but drive the vehicle. And drive the vehicle within an operational design domain, which is its working environment, whether that be weather conditions, road conditions, day, night, other road users, etc. Everything that describes the dynamic driving task and basically the box in which you are operating. Now, what I wanted to do is share with you is what we've got here is what was the original J3016 from SAE, which were what people referred to as level insert number here. This has been around since 2014, has most recently been updated in 2021. But what you will see here is clear differentiation between the blue and the green. So levels 0 to 2 are what we've been talking about as ADAS or active safety or different features. But again, look here, you are driving. You are in control. They are driver support features. When we look at levels of ADS relating to level 3, 4, and 5, then you are not driving. Excuse me. The vehicle system is in control. Level 3 becomes somewhat of a gray area when, if the feature requests, you will actually be in a fallback position where the driver is requested to take over control. This is something that's being looked at less and less. Excuse me. Level 4 tends to be the main focus right now because it is a limited operational design domain. Level 5 would be described as the holy grail. Drive anywhere, anytime, with anything, in any weather, anytime. Level 4 is a more constrained operational design domain, which is what people are working to at the moment. What's happening within the trucking community is 3016 has been taken and we're developing a new standard, 3150, which is actually the taxonomy and definitions for commercial vehicle automated systems. So this is still currently under development. So although 3016 is for the four-wheeler variety, it is a very good guide for now. 3150 will be very specific for the commercial vehicle systems. Hopefully within the next 18 months, this should be issued as a recommended practice. Excuse me. What I'd like just to finish this section on is a key point. We cannot forget this. You add up all of these driver assistance systems, forward collision warning, lane keep assist, automatic emergency braking. These are not additive to all of a sudden miraculously and magically give you an automated driving system. That is not how it works. These are discrete systems on board as a warning, as more of a warning in terms of part of an active control system. And they are features that can be switched on or switched off within a particular vehicle. Whereas going back to the definition, the ADS is where it is an automated driving system holistically. So please do not forget that. We mentioned here, I just want to give an example here, which people have spoken of a little, so I won't go on too much about this. But again, active safety, collision avoidance, ADAS, unfortunately, it's all getting bundled. This is where I think TechCelerate needs to fully define exactly the correct meaning and definitions of the terms. If we look here at automatic emergency braking, for example, number of studies, this is truck safety, the number of rear end collisions, unsafe following distance, improper lane changes, number of reductions that we're seeing. Work that IIHS has done in terms of looking at reductions of rear end crashes. And also, excuse me, NTSB, the amount of work and incidents they have been to. AEB has been on their most wanted list for several years. Excuse me. But also the European Union has required AEB with forward collision warning on most heavy trucks since November 13. But the US does not have a similar requirement. We understand that the take-up rate is just over 50%. And for AEB, there should be an NPRM, notice of proposed rulemaking, next year for this, which has been a long time coming, but we believe that will be happening next year. ADS for trucks. Just briefly before I go on, this is a very dynamic business environment. The key is the ROI for trucking. There is an ROI, which is something very different to the passenger car market business model. This is due to the immediate benefits long-haul trucks have to potentially be the first segment in the ADS space to scale up to volume. And companies have and continue to test ADS on US highways, both with safety operators on board and some with remote operation. And to me, I fully support that. If you are on the road testing an automated system, you should have gone through simulation, you should have gone through proving ground and off-road private proving ground work to prove there's a safety case that will allow you from a safety perspective to run on the road. If you deem safely that you will have an experienced operator behind the wheel, that is an extra safety precaution. It's still an ADS, but the safety operator is there not as a driver, but as another additional safety element. Current state. So when it comes to level 0 to 2, A, B, and other ADAS features are available options and have been for some time. Freightliner Cascadia was the first level 2, right from the 2020 model. If you look at level 4, no one's working on 5. On level 4, these are currently prototype systems retrofitted on current vehicles, which have gone through simulation and proving ground validation to get to highway operations. And also they're doing some remote driving in constrained situations. But it's clear also platooning is something we haven't spoken much of here. Also, this is another key benefit, and especially as a key ROI to fleet operators in terms of major fuel savings. And therefore, Federal Highway is carrying out a program here to look at the fully quantify the savings and the interactions with other road users. Future state, this is always a debate. It's never right or wrong. But if you're looking at the OE fitted ADS systems, yes, there will be a widespread adoption within the next 5 to 10 years for level 4. And certain levels of remote monitoring and operation capability. The level 4 could be, and we're not talking going from basically the deck of the depot all the way to the deck of the next depot, 700, 2,000 miles away. This could be from an ODD as being basically at the on-ramp to the off-ramp. Everything in between could be done remotely or with a particular driver. So we have to be careful when we're defining what the operational design domain is. Again, the context is always important. When we look at ADAS for future state, to me, I see widespread adoption. Clearly, TechCelerate has its job to do. But widespread adoption really has to be ongoing. And platooning, really see this as OE and aftermarket fitment for on-highway use. What we see at the moment, when we say over the next 5 to 10 years for level 4, the ODD again is very important. Majority of testing has been carried out in the Southwest. Why? Road conditions, weather conditions. So if you're looking at a rollout of the next 5 to 10 years, my prediction is the initial rollout will still continue to be in the Southwest. We'll then continue on sort of mid-southeast, so then taking over the country at a lower level, because I can't see I-70 in Colorado being the main focus right now for this type of thing. Too many other ODD implications. But really, we're looking at national deployment well beyond that. And again, it's proven it is safe to do so. Major safety issue, major lockdown. So we have to do this on a crawl, walk, run situation. We cannot go too far. Safety is of absolute paramount importance, as I started presentation today, for adoption. Benefits, and clearly there could be some debate from what I've heard so far, but you look at safety, you look at reduction in collisions for both ADAS and ADS. You can look here at reduced collisions. Number of studies that were carried out in terms of DOT studies, Volvo truck study did with DOT. Conway did a study as well, looking at number of collisions. So this is real world activation. So looking at this and how this would be enhanced with ADS looks to be an improvement also in safety. Also, a consistent expert driver at all times with 360-degree view at all times in all weathers. Then lastly, benefits really is the economic and efficiency side. Reduction in number of drivers, you see 70 to 90,000 drivers still required. Will there be drivers still required in 10 years? The answer is, of course it will. But that's why when you look at the adoption, it's going to be different. So it's the migration of this. This isn't an overnight step change. People need to stop thinking of it as if I'm out of a job tomorrow. That is not the case. The adoption here will be slow. It will be done on a geographic basis and with different fleets and for different reasons and for different ODDs. Consistent expert driver at all times. That, again, there's no arrogance involved here. This can be there for those particular trucks. The expert drivers are still experts. No one's taking anything away from them. From platooning, they're looking between 4 and 11% fuel reduction, on average about 7%. Most fleets would be looking very positively at anything from 1 to 2%. So anything from 4 to 11, I think, would be looked upon very favorably. Collision repair cost reduction, related insurance cost, increased hours of service as well. If you're looking at that in terms that there is an operator stroke driver on board, it can be going for more than 8 hours. You get overall time savings, where the truck can cross the country in 36 hours. So we're looking there for trucks actually becoming competitive with rail. Therefore, it becomes a higher utilization of vehicles. So in the midst of severe driver shortage, as is claimed, rising driver pay, self-driving trucks, they're saying that there's overall reductions. The consultants have done many numbers to say trucking costs could be reduced by 15 to 25%. Came from David Vernon and Sanford Bernstein and Co. If we look at people like Plus, they will look to say it can reduce costs by 38%. Embark have said it can deliver a 45% per mile cost saving, according to the Wall Street Journal. But to me, I'll go back to the ATRI data, dollar per mile or hour, and then we'll see what history brings us. But there's a lot of testing still to be done, a lot of work still to be done, and fundamentally it starts with what TechCelerate is doing. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We're actually going to go ahead and move straight into our second session discussing secondary benefits. So we're going to start with some brief introductions by each of the two guests themselves, and then we're going to move into some questions from the two of them. We have received some questions in advance from the audience as they registered, but we do encouraging the audience to keep sending additional questions via the chat function so we can address them as time allows. Our first panelist is Andrea Dickinson with Armwinds Insurance Brokerage, Tennessee. Andrea, could you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your work in insurance?
We saved the favorite two people for last, insurance person and attorney. So you're welcome for that. Thank you for having me today. My name is Andrea Dickinson. Like she said, I've been with Amwins now on the wholesale side of insurance procurement for 17 years. Prior to that, I was with an insurance company for 2 years. And in my entire career, I've always focused on the commercial transportation industry.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for being here with us. Our second guest is Rob Mosley with Mosley Marcinek Law Group. Rob, could you give us an introduction to you and your work?
Sure. I've spent 30 years learning how to practice law and represent trucking companies and folks in the transportation industry, working here in Greenville, South Carolina.
Thanks, Rob. And we're so lucky again to have both of you. If it's all right with you, I think we're going to go ahead and dive into some of the questions we've received from the audience involving your perspectives and, get that what Andrea mentioned, the insurance and defense attorney perspective. So Andrea, I would like to start with you actually on the first one. Commercial transportation insurance has traditionally not offered front-end discounts on in-cab technology investments. Is this model changing? And if so, what's motivated that change?
That's a great question. And actually it is starting to change. So in the past, typically you would only see the benefit of insurance savings once the loss history improved, or the cab got better. And now what we're seeing, I think a lot of insurance companies are recognizing the shift and the importance with data, with the technology. So now we're starting to see upfront savings on insurance premiums if there's technology, and then there are also like agreements in place to help the insured save money on that technology. They have certain partnerships and things like that, the monthly service costs, all of that. But then also we're seeing that they want the data. That's how they will agree to give a premium savings, is if there's technology and if the insurance companies can get the data. This is relatively new. There's only a handful of people that are starting to do this, but they're doing it because they recognize that data drives a lot of our industry, actuarially speaking, and the more they know, the smarter they can be and the better they can price risks appropriately.
Absolutely. And data obviously plays a big role in terms of civil litigation in your world, Rob. So in terms of civil litigation, what percentage of truck involved cases today would you say use safety technology data in the challenges to plaintiffs?
I think virtually every case has the technological data, whether it's a download of a engine control module or whether it's recordings from an event recorder or anything like that. But it'd be pretty rare to see a truck accident case today that didn't have at least some element of the technological data.
Absolutely. And Andrea, just kind of rolling back a little bit to maybe a more basic question, but how do insurance companies know that their clients are buying safety technologies? Is there work that fleets can be doing to provide that data you mentioned to insurers, showing the ADAS investments, or how does that work out?
So the way they know is that they're asking. So I hope you can see my screen here. I just decided to share a copy. A few years ago, this didn't exist. We did not have technology applications. Now we do. And they're incredibly helpful and an important part of the underwriting file so that we can know exactly how an insured is investing in technology. It's something that underwriters look at so closely. And, as time has progressed, and I will just preface that most of the accounts I work on are fleet accounts, 10 power units and above. But, an underwriter I spoke with earlier today emphasized that, tech, when it first started a few years back, and it was starting to become more prevalent, they would try to capture that data, the old school way, see if there was improvement in losses and that kind of thing. Today, if an insured doesn't have certain technology in their vehicles, they almost won't offer terms to those insureds because they view that the insured's not investing in themselves, in their own safety culture. So it's becoming more and more prevalent that it's almost the new norm, if you will. Now, obviously, it varies in terms of what level they have and to what extent, whether their owner operators may participate or if it's just company drivers and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to share this transportation application because, again, our underwriters are asking us for this information. They want to know exactly what tech they have. And again, more and more, especially for primary auto liability coverage, they're asking for access to the data.
Absolutely. And that access to data seems really interesting. And Rob, I know you have some information to share there as well. You know, fleets generate a lot of data. Can you give any advice on how they can separate out the important versus insignificant data?
Well, the problem that the industry has today is that there's so much data but there's no real interpretation of the data. In other words, they get all the data dumped on them, but they don't really know what's important and what's not. And so, for example, how many hard brakes is too many? How many lane departures is too many? You know, what's an acceptable number of driver errors and what's not? And so, you know, when you know, and we're getting to the point quickly where maybe even there's the concept that you should have taken the driver off the road that day because he or she was having a bad day, and you should have known that. You should have been so responsive to the data that you should have said, hey, what's going on with this guy? And so what happens is every time you add another piece of technology to the vehicle, you add more data. More data creates more duty. And so as a trucking company is inundated with this data, they have to make decisions on the data. They have to review that data. Maybe it means coaching a driver. Maybe it means you know, doing something else, you know, dealing with equipment issues or what have you. But it puts this data in front of the motor carrier and requires a response. Unfortunately, where we are today, that we just don't have the studies to know what should the response be, what data should they pay attention to, and what's the chaff.
Definitely. And Andrea, another question we get sometimes from the developer side is there more of a role for ADAS developers in communicating data about their technologies to fleets or insurers?
You know, I would say that as insurance companies are trying to get on this data train and tech train, a great recommendation would be to court insurance companies that specialize in the motor carrier space just as heavily as you're courting the motor carriers who utilize the equipment. Because it seems like monthly we're getting new information about tech partnerships with insurance companies and the providers that they promote, that they offer discounts with, if they bind with them, that kind of thing. So just don't forget about the insurance companies, because while they may not be there yet, they're interested, they're intrigued, and they don't want to be left behind in the tech and data frontier, if you will. And I think they're very interested in engaging more on that.
Absolutely. And Rob, before we get into some questions kind of involving mandates and regulation, is there anything else you want to share from your experience, you know, in the attorney space regarding this topic?
Sure. I would say that fleets need to figure out what data they need to actively manage a driver, and then they need to figure out how to delete that data, because fleets have a way of saving everything and making good drivers seem like bad drivers. And so I'm a big fan of keeping what you need to actively manage that driver, and then figuring out a way to delete information that's old and stale and doesn't apply to the way the driver's driving the truck today.
Absolutely. So our next set of questions you'd received from the audience involved organizations and regulation around data and insurance. And so one question we received was, does trucking need a specific IIHS type organization focused on improving data collection and analysis for trucks? And don't want to hold you guys to an official position, but curious, Andrea, if you see a need for that kind of work in this space.
Possibly. I know that the technology and the data it provides motor carriers is only as good as what you're doing with that information. I know we've seen cases against a trucker before where they had cameras, they had information, but they didn't do anything with it, and they used that against them. So whatever means they can get more organized with that, they need the help because it is a lot. Like Rob said, there's just so much out there. So the more help that can be offered in managing the data and exactly what they need to keep, what they need to focus on, how they use it. And absolutely, carriers are looking for insureds to use that data to coach driver behavior, catch bad habits, that kind of thing, the better.
Rob, anything to add there?
No, I think the truckers need something to help them manage the data. They don't have any standards. They don't have any understanding of what's an acceptable criteria and what's not. So if we can figure out a way to develop that, and maybe the manufacturers of this equipment can kind of take the lead and figure out at what point should a motor carrier be concerned.
Absolutely. Another question we received was, and Rob, I think I'll direct this at you first, but is, should we expect regulators to ramp up their ADAS requirements or mandates over the coming months or years? Any prediction there?
I think that generally speaking, the FMCSA is hesitant to mandate things, and that not until the technology is really ready for prime time. We're seeing an FMCSA that is looking to encourage that type of equipment and that sort of thing. So I think we'll probably see more of a carrot approach where they want to encourage that equipment as opposed to the stick approach where they mandate it and punish not having it.
Definitely. And, thinking about exactly what you're talking about, Rob, in terms of encouraging technology and not punishing, I'd love to kind of broadly get both of your perspective on this next question, and have you guys share some examples of what you think some successful carrots or some successful sticks might be that insurance companies and agencies could use to help increase the adoption of these safety technologies. So, Andrea, I'll start with you from the insurance perspective of some of those successful carrot sticks.
Sure. So, a very micro example is that we had an insured who had a loss, and when the state trooper pulled over the trucker, they took the, four-wheel car passenger's word on what happened, that the trucker came into their lane and hit them. The driver, who has a CDL, was given a citation for an at-fault accident. And, they were looking at defending this loss. And luckily, they had cameras that very clearly showed the claimant vehicle crashing in, crossing over the lane into our driver, who maintained lane the entire time. And it not only exonerated them from that claim, but it also, they took it to the local sheriff's department or wherever and got that record removed from that driver's MVR. So that's an extreme micro example, but there's bigger. Like, I work with some of the largest trucking companies in the country who are able to really show that ROI on the technology. And that was touched on, I think, previously, how it's decreased rear end accidents, preventable accidents. And that kind of data and information, again, is so helpful. And it makes the insured feel good about their investment, and it makes the insurance companies feel great that there is a benefit and that they're doing all those right things.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I would agree with what Andrea says. And I would say that the technology is we're seeing how it plays out, and we're even seeing startup insurance companies that are based on technology, almost to the point of assigning you premium based on how you drove yesterday. And so we're seeing the underwriting keep up with the technology, and certainly a lot of underwriters are mandating the technology, even if FMCSA is not.
Absolutely. And just as we kind of start to wrap up this session, I'd love to hear if either of you have, one kind of final point you'd like to leave this audience with regards to your industry. Rob, we'll start with you.
I love cameras. I think there's not even a discussion about return on investment. Don't even talk about return on investment. But the equipment that helps the drivers learn to be better drivers is going to be what not just a continuously recording camera, because that's just proactive or reactive. You're only looking at if an accident happens, you're pulling the camera to see what happened. But if the equipment is triggered by G-forces and acceleration rates and all these things that the smart people on this call understand, and I don't, then you're gonna have the opportunity to coach your drivers and try to help your drivers eliminate dangerous behavior. And I think that's the key is being able to work with drivers and help good drivers be great drivers, and help marginal drivers be good drivers.
And Andrea, back to you for your final takeaway.
That's a hard answer to follow, because I totally agree with and underline everything Rob just said. But I would say from the insurance perspective, I recognize that it's been a frustrating period of time with premiums and things like that. But I think insurance companies are getting the message that technology and data are very important, and they are going to start their own investments, their own partnerships. They're going to try to start underwriting risks on an individual basis, even more so, because they'll have data to point to. So, they may need a little bit of time to catch up, but as Rob pointed out, new companies are starting up all the time where their focus from day one is tech. And I think that's going to become more common, as well as the existing long-term players in the space will continue to grow and adopt in that field. So just give them time. They're working on it just as you all are.
Thank you. That unfortunately puts us at the end of time for this session. It went by really quick, and Andrea and Rob, thank you both so much for lending your experience and expertise to this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you again to everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our partners for helping us on this great event, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you so much.